So hi everyone. So this instance of the Tech Forum will be talking about the long-term support proposal. So this will be led by Okash from Google and Varun Wadekar from NVIDIA. We are going to discuss on some of the requirements and open questions on providing the TFA long-term support releases. It will be like mostly focusing on some of the technical aspects with some suggestions and examples for the long-term support. And we also will like open up like discussions on resourcing and some funding considerations later. So yeah, it's like to kind of establish and exchange our views on this particular topic of interest to the community. So off to you, Okash.
Hi there. Thanks, Bipin. Right, so this is long-term support 2.0. This is another attempt at getting long-term support going. Last time we tried, Varun led the effort, and then there seemed to be some consensus, but things didn't go through. So this time, Varun and I have joined hands to hope that this time we get it passed. So Varun and I and other folks, we've been discussing this, and we have some sort of proposal, some sort of agreement. So we'll try to cover that today. So basically, what we're trying to achieve here is have a long-term support story for all the projects on tf.org. I mean, have some sort of proposal. There are a couple of open questions that Bipin alluded to at the beginning. We should be able to get some sort of coverage on those, like closure on those. Maybe not all, but at least have the discussion going on those. And then gather feedback from community, what people think. And that's the idea for this presentation. Right, so the motivation for long-term support is really driven by commercial reasons. So once the products get released, they have to be maintained in field with minimum risk. Or if you think of like devices, then if they are in the field, you want to minimize the risk while they are in the field. And for server systems, for data center systems, again, when you want to upgrade or provide a patch to the firmware, you want to minimize the risk. You want to minimize the downtime. And hence the idea of LTS. The idea of LTS is to basically avoid doing a full update of TFA in field. So if there's TFA running on devices or on server systems, and we want to do a full TFA upgrade, then that would be quite risky. For example, there could be changes in how TFA interacts with other layers of software. Or there could be other things in TFA itself which haven't had enough testing done. So we want to minimize that risk. But at the same time, we want to address critical bugs and patch them. Critical security bugs, to be more specific, or something like a CPU errata that really needs to be fixed in the field, and otherwise, things will blow up, or something really bad will happen. So the best option is to have incremental updates for the devices that are already in field or systems that are already in field. And those incremental updates should only include the bare minimum changes, really, to minimize the risk and any churn during incident response. So when I say incident response, think of data center systems where you have ARM servers running and you want to respond to some sort of critical security bug that's come up or anything like that, and then you want to minimize anything else that gets disturbed as a result of response to that particular incident. Now this is the sort of thing that partners would normally do on their own. So if a partner has a product that is released with a particular TFA version, then they would backport critical patches that they think are very important for those devices, and then deploy them through some mechanism of update that they have. And then they have to maintain that going forward as well. And that's something that every partner would be, or not every partner that has product that goes out is very likely doing on their own. And the idea behind having this LTS discussion and having something in place within with TFA is to minimize, to factor out that effort into one place, so that we are not duplicating these efforts across all the partners are not doing the same thing multiple times, and do it only in one place. So we're kind of factoring out the common theme across all the partners, which also kind of blends in with our initial goal of making minimum changes, because when you think about the common factor, you want to have the minimum set of changes included in there. Right. So, oh, by the way, I didn't mention, but if you have any questions, just feel free to open your mic and start asking questions. But we should have some time for discussion at the end. There are not that many slides. So scope of the branch would be, so scope of LTS branch would be, again, now this is something that we want to really define in a very clear way, in a very objective way. And so the question this slide is trying to answer is what patches will be backported to LTS branches. So we don't want to open up the scope or leave it very fuzzy or undefined. We want to have very clear criteria so that when there is time to backport, we know what to backport, and we don't engage in long discussions about what is classified as a LTS bug versus non-LTS bug. And then if we have objective, well-defined criteria, then we also are in a position to automate all of that stuff as well, as much as possible. But if the criteria is subjective, then it doesn't lead itself to automation. And obviously, automation is there to drive down costs, minimize errors, and that kind of stuff. So yeah, these are things that we find agreement on that we should actually backport, and then and I'll go through them. But then we can always extend the criteria as we go forward. So we should have that room for always improving this, but we should start out with a sure footing where we know for sure what we want. And then so that the whole LTS thing actually happens, because as I mentioned before, we tried before, it didn't happen. So even to bring it about, we need to kind of have something very concrete to minimize other reasons for it to dilute or not come into practice. So security advisories, yes, we want all the security advisories to be backported. There are not that many. They're on average maybe one in a year. There's critical CPU router fixes. We want those backported as well through LTS. ARM IP router fixes. There might not be that many. I think the emphasis usually is on the partners to provide, like interconnect router or that kind of stuff. But if there is something like that, then that can be backported as well. Partner IP router fixes, they are in the same bucket. Platform bug fixes. These are bug fixes for a particular partner's own platform, and hence they don't touch any code that is outside of their own platform directory. And that should not have any impact on other partners or the common code. So I think that should be okay. And it's up to the partner to decide what they want to backport. One thing that we want to make clear is that no new features will be backported. So it's only the bug fixes, security, and critical security bug fixes. And also security advisories, if there are any, for external components like libFTT. So anything that becomes part of security advisory automatically becomes a candidate for backporting.
What about, this is good, right? But what about functional fixes, right? Say you've got hafnium and you've got a coherency bug, which basically breaks functionality significantly, right? we should consider some of those things as well, right? Or are we saying, as a baseline, that isn't something we want to do?
Right. So that's a good question. And this is something that we did discuss before as well. The thing that we're trying to achieve here right now is very clear objective criteria. If we can objectively define, and as part of minimum set, what is a functional fix, then that's okay. But when it becomes a feature, when it's sorry, go ahead.
No, finish your thought.
And I was just going to say, like, how it could be interpreted as a feature, and with the ones that we have covered so far, these are like they can be clearly defined. Security advisories, they are the ones that become advisories. They go on right in superior data. We know what superior data is. There's no two ways about any of these things that we have covered here. But when we talk about functional fixes, we don't. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. So that makes sense to me, right? So maybe along with this, you also need a list of things that we definitely know is not a part of it, right? So you can use the example that I gave you as something that says, okay, no, we will not fix this in our first initial proposal for LTS branch, right? And maybe you have this in a future slide, but you also probably need some arbiters for these gray areas that say, yes, this makes it in, or don't, right? So perhaps that's a maintainers, but it's something to consider as well.
Right. I'm taking notes as you go. So
comment, Okash.
Yeah. Is that? Go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, Okash and I discussed a lot on this topic. It did make this slide. I think we have an open question at the end, but yeah, this is so eventually what we said is this is a starting set, but it's not like this is the final set. We definitely want to keep the discussion going, and eventually we want. So we don't talk a lot about the mechanisms and the nitty-gritties of the process, even because initially we want to see if the process itself or the direction itself makes sense. So we also want to come up with a way where people can report all these issues, and then if they have, as Okash said, if they have a specific, let's say for example, if they have a specific test that they know that they can say that, yeah, this is the test, or this is the benchmark, or this is whatever a real world use case that is failing. This is the bug that we found, or this is a security issue, or whatever. This is the thing that we found, and we feel it should be part of the LTS. So, and then we have a discussion around it, and if it makes sense, then we can merge it. We are not saying that this is it, and nothing else should go in. But this is just a first stab.
Actually, I'm saying the opposite, right? I'm saying for your first stab, you want to be very precise about what is in scope and what is out of scope. And when we then discuss a V2.0 version of what is in scope and what is out of scope, right? If it's not crisp, then I think you can end up in, there's always going to be gray areas, but you could end up in an argument saying, hey, I think this fits the criteria, this doesn't, right? So you definitely need sort of solid criteria that is not open to
this is this is the baseline criteria, and we will follow, we hope to follow this, but there will always be some situations where people find bugs and issues which might not be faced by others. But I'm saying if we want to also accommodate those situations, and that's the we want to keep the door open. We don't want to say that we won't take anything else.
Yep.
But of course,
my recommendation would be, and I tend to agree with Raghu on this, make it small, start with clear rules of what goes in and what's not, okay? And then you can consider to expand it. That would be my, you're defining something sensible here, which is a minimum viable set of things that make it worthwhile creating an LTS and backporting things into the LTS. And there are very clear criteria, right? Everybody knows what a fix goes into a security vulnerability or not, or an errata bug fix. So keep it clear and simple as a starting point. That's my suggestion.
I think we're all on the same page. I think I think we're all in agreement that it has to be very well defined. It has to be minimum, and I think that's what we've tried to attempt here, because all of these things you can clearly, like platform fixes, they have to be in a particular platform directory. Errata fixes, I think CPU erratas are very easy to identify. ARM and ARM IP partner errata fixes, I think there are also, I think these are the ones, maybe that's what you're concerned about, but I guess these are also quite easy to identify. Like there's no two ways about it being an errata fix or not, because it has to be an errata document for it to be a workaround.
Right. So
security approach.
well, one of the things this does not say is no feature bug fixes, right? Or yes, featured bug fixes. So, you know, I guess, yeah, in that no new features is very clear, but no new features is not bug, you know, is not exactly clear, right? So maybe
Okay,
we want to add
got
some stricter criteria like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Otherwise, this
sounds good.
looks good. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've taken note. Right, sounds good. Any other points regarding this?
No, not to get into a can of worms. I guess what is a feature and what is a bug can be a bit of a grey area, but I assume things like, you know, an obvious memory corruption in a feature, and an off one by error, or a missing memory barrier or something like that, some sort of small fix to a feature that gets rid of a sort of a fairly critical bug is probably more in league for here, as opposed to something, oh, we're missing this sub feature, which some people may view as a bug and others may not. Probably wouldn't be, but
If it's critical enough, it should really. Sorry, go ahead.
I was about to say the maintainers of this branch probably need to make that decision rather than us trying to pin it down too much here.
Yeah, that's right. And we can consider these things down the line as well. We start out with very restricted criteria, and then we can, you know, as Matteo said. Right, so moving on to release model. This is more into like the mechanics of it, but not like too low level detail. But really looking at how the branch will play out and what sort of a few more details, and they pose some questions as well, which will be good to get an agreement on as well. I think first of all, I just want to point out here that it's really good to see agreement on this because we had a lot of discussions regarding the scope of the branch. So it's really good that we seem to be on board that it has to be minimal. And one way I'd say to think about this is to think of what can we automate, because that then makes it very objective, you know. So all of these things can be automatically picked up by a daemon as again did patch fix. So going into the release model, so this is like how to manage the releases and stuff. So one of the things, so what we're thinking of is have one release per year, and that's something that I think we all agreed on. One release per year in November. So since TFS2 releases May and November release becomes the LTS. Each LTS will be supported for 5 years. We need to allow, I'm going to just rattle through these and then we can open, you know, you can ask, have your comments once I just go through these points. We allow some soak time for additional testing and hardening before we cut the LTS release. So if November is when the TFA release comes out, we give it like a month, 2 months, maybe up to 3 months for LTS to come out. The reason for soak time is that the expectation is that if the partners are releasing products with LTS, which is what the purpose of LTS is, then there's likely to be more testing on the LTS branch, and hence there needs to be some time for hardening. Have a separate branch for LTS, and then use the existing CI/CD flow that we have, which is brilliant, I think, to automatically test for regressions. Patches should flow from main branch to LTS. Again, there are open questions and we can discuss a few more details, but the idea is that the main branch is a superset of all the changes, and LTS contains subset of the patches that main branch contains. So if you want to put anything in LTS, it has to go via main branch. That's the idea. Platforms already in the upstream testing firm will get coverage by default. Obviously, I mean, these are the, I think bronze, diamond partners. And then they already have their devices covered by TF's testing infrastructure, so they will get coverage for LTS already. And downstream platforms will have to verify their LTS branches separately to ensure that quality of their platforms, right? And that can be covered within that soak time that we have. And let me just cover slide number 6 as well, because that then completes the whole thing, and then you can make your points, ask any questions. So this is just to drive home what we covered in the previous slide, using some sort of example. So let's say in November of a particular year, we have TFA X.Y that comes out. Then we give it a few months, let's say 3 months, and in February of the next year, we basically we release LTS X.Y.0. And then in the May of that year, we have the new TFA version Y+1. And then let's say before the November of that year, there is some candidate for LTS. Let's say it's a security advisory fix. So for that we got LTS X.Y.1. So TFA at that point is X.Y+1, which will then the head will keep rolling and it will include the advisory, and then that advisory patch will then be backported to LTS X.Y.1, LTS X.Y, and then we increment the least significant version number. And then in the November of that year, we have TFA X.Y+2, and as a result, we have and 3 months later, we have in February we have LTS X.Y+2, but we also have now LTS X.Y.1, right? So and so as you can see, we will have 5 concurrent branches in the worst case, and they will stay 5 for LTS. Yeah, so that's the idea. What is not mentioned here is that TFTF will also have to follow similar branching, given that as we add more and more TFTF tests, they might not apply to the LTS branch that we are targeting. So for LTS branches, we'll have corresponding LTS TFTF branches as well.
Sorry, could you? It isn't clear to me why we said we'd have 5 branches, right? So are you saying it's 1 per security advisory, or is it just 1 branch in November and then all the fixes and things go and we just tag it? Is that how you're thinking? I didn't quite understand the 5 branches concept.
Right, sure. So what will happen is every year in February, a new LTS branch will come out. And each LTS branch has to be supported for 5 years. So at the end of 5 years, we'll have 5 LTS branches.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So each November you sort of ratify, or each February you ratify a new new LTS branch. But what does that mean to support the previous branch, right? So let's say we have 2.7.1 this year and 2.7.2 next year. Does it mean additional maintenance burden, as in we have to maintain 2.6.1, 2.7.1 and 2.7.2, or is
so it'll be 2.8. 2.9, sorry. So whenever the November release comes out, TFA, 3 months later we have LTS release, and then we have to support every LTS branch for 5 years. So that means that LTS X.Y, whatever number happens to be, will be supported up to K plus 5, year K plus 5. So because it came out in K plus 1, so that's the first year, 2, 3, 4, 5, right?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think I misunderstood what you said. Okay, it makes sense now. It's just basically a new branch every November. It's as simple as that, right?
Simple as that. But every November or February, whatever the grace period is.
Yeah.
So
right.
And then that particular branch has to live and be supported for 5 years. A similar model what Linux, how Linux kernel do it as well today.
So the way this
so that-
is working out, it'd be every odd numbered release. 2.7, which was done last November, would be the release, and then 2.9, which is probably there might be a simpler way of at least initially thinking about it.
Correct. Yeah. Maybe if I replace these numbers with actual concrete numbers, then would have been easier to understand. But yeah, that's exactly the idea, that every November release then becomes LTS, and then that LTS has to be supported for 5 years.
One comment, actually, in this timeline, we have, this is an example timeline, but in this example, we have assumed a soak time, which is, let's say, 3 months after the November release. So in another example, we can also try to merge that soak time with the actual November release soak time. It all depends on, I think it is tied with the funding discussion. But I mean, that's also one possibility to make the most of the resources that we have. So I mean, so as I said, I mean, this is just an example. If the other example makes sense, we can also go in that direction.
Just on the last bullet point, so it says LTS branch version is pumped when a fix is merged. So does it mean anything that falls under the slide that you had, maybe at slide 4? So any bug fix or anything can trigger a new tag?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't personally see a problem with monotonically increasing version numbers. It just helps us kind of track changes better, if that makes sense.
So is that every patch that goes in, you're tagging the number, or?
I mean, we're assuming here that patches will be sporadic. They will be far apart enough. But let's say if there are 2 patch fixes right at the same time, it doesn't really matter. We can just have them. So this doesn't, the least significant number doesn't signify the patches. I think it signifies the releases. So if we decide that 2 patches happen at the same time, then we release, just make one LTS release.
Okay.
But the assumption is the patches will be so few and far between that these will be same as patch number of fixes that we export.
Yes and no, in the sense of hopefully there aren't too many vulnerabilities that need to be addressed, but there is quite a stream of erratas that are constantly being worked on and being added.
You probably need a cadence for that too, right? And maybe initially it's a 6-month cadence or a 3-month cadence where we do your least significant number release on the LTS branch.
Right. So that is a good question. Now with cadence, does that mean that we don't release until we hit that cadence deadline? Because one of the aspects of LTS, one of the key aspects of LTS is incident response. So if something very critical comes up, we want to push it out, as soon as we can.
Yeah, that's the approach that MBTLS, which is one of the TF projects, take. So you'll keep pushing bug fixes to the LTS branch all along, but normally the tag on the LTS happens when there's a security advisory fix. So that's normally what triggers a tag. But I was just looking at the release note of the LTS we published for MBTLS 2 days back, and it has got like 20 or 30 bug fix, but there are a few security advisories that can fix. So I think, yeah, just an input in MBTLS, that's how it's handled. Not a tag for every bug fix, but normally the security disclosure or something like that sort of calls for a tag.
Okay.
I guess
Yeah, that's a pretty good trigger. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
All I was going to say, I guess it's a maintainer's decision. Okay, we've had a number of erratas in. Don't see any more coming for a few weeks or what have you, and then you you produce a tag, because I can understand if you could hold off forever, or you do it every change. So somehow you need a balance between the two. Because the whole purpose of this is so that folks downstream aren't having to do this downstream, isn't it? That's what you want.
Right. So, I mean, the version numbers help with when you push out the changes as well. If we are like, let's say, as patches came in, like in X.5.1 and then LTS X.5.1, and then there are more patches that came in, but we still keep the version number X.5.1. Which X.5.1 is running on what device, we don't know. So I think we have to think about this a bit more, maybe. But personally, again, it's my personal thinking. I'm open both ways, but I think that if the minor version number keeps monotonically increasing, it's like 237. It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, I mean, that was even my thinking. Finally, in the actual on-field device, you need a way to identify which version has been installed is running. So if the best approach is bump it up for every fix, that way you can exactly identify what is running where. So yeah, that was the thought process, I think, when we discussed about the version number increase.
I mean, it's quite a utilitarian argument. It ignores the psychological factor of large version numbers implying a lot of bugs, which might factor in. But I think we are dealing with like actual devices in the field, and we've got other pressures to deal with, commercial pressures to deal with.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just wrapping up my point. Go ahead.
I was saying, I mean, yeah, but if you do increase it for every bug fix, then, let's say we've got 2.7.237. Does that mean we have approved, 237 versions as having had enough soak time and, production worthy? That's a problem too, right? If you have a cadence, then you've got this soak time issue as well, right? If there's a 3-month soak time, you want to tag something only after that soak time, after the bug fixes, right?
True. However, the 3-month soak time is for the first one that gets cut, like the 0.0, X.Y.0. The incremental ones, sometimes you want to push them out very, very quickly because it's a very critical bug. So we just want to make sure that we have tested enough. So we, our CI/CD tests pass and the partners are okay. They give, the downstream partners who are affected, they are okay with this. And then we push it out. We don't want that 3-month period for every incremental backport.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so if you've got like 5 bug fixes that went in that causes a 6th bug, right? So yeah, you need, I guess, minimal CI/CD or some minimal soak time before you say, okay, this is good and stable, right? Maybe it's not 3 months, but maybe it's a week.
Yeah. I think that's reasonable.
So every sprint that the ARM team is working on erratas, there's Bipin can correct me, but there's multiple erratas probably being worked on, and probably every sprint we're delivering at least one, if not more, erratas into the mainline branch. And of course, not everybody is interested in every errata. It all depends on what CPUs that you're using and other system IP. How would you want to manage them being added to the LTSs? Individually as they come out, or in batches, or...
Yeah, very good question. I mean, going by what we were thinking, it'd be like one release for every time there is a set of erratas, we just increase the version number. If that's too much of a burden, then we can start thinking of how we can address this as like a modification to the criteria that we already have. I think the baseline is that we actually release every errata. work around.
All I'm thinking is you want this to be fairly stable, and we've got like a continuous stream of erratas that we're pushing mitigations into the base. I don't know, Bipin, if you got any numbers that you could confirm.
Not that I have read, something that I have read.
No, Bipin may.
Yeah, but to look into. Yeah, I think it's worth looking into.
Yeah, actually, a related question is, so it will be, so LTS is probably based on like CPU, like the CPUs in production and stable devices. And how would you come up with that list based on like other partners involved as well to come to a common agreeable ground?
Of which errata? Which
CPUs or actually which IPs got impacted in which partner, and we have to have the list from like different partners on a common agreeable list for the LTS, right?
Right.
I would actually look at it the other in a different way. I would look at it in terms of what the branch already has, and then what comes as a fix to the code that's already there. I mean, because today we might just have, let's say, 3 partners using this, but down the line we want to increase that to 10, 20 partners. So we don't know, who's going to come on board and how they're going to use it. So rather, I would look at it as a snapshot in time, and then whatever we have at that time, if it is a bug fix or an errata for the current CPUs that are already present, then we just accept it. For any new CPUs, it doesn't make sense because we already said no new features. So that will go into maybe the next LTS version, which has that CPU support.
Okay, so that's something that we already have. So, but at some point, there may be like interesting erratas for the CPUs under consideration already, right? So you can always have like new high priority erratas that come for existing CPUs, which is supported in the LTS.
Yeah, and
right.
With this current criteria, we will accept those erratas.
Okay.
Right. And then it's up to the partners whether they want to release that particular LTS onto their devices, right? So if one of the partners doesn't use the CPUs that isn't affected by the CPU errata, then they can choose to skip the LTS. It's not mandatory. It's up to them.
I mean, none of this is going to stop partners doing their own testing downstream. It's just you're just trying to minimize what you can. Have a common testing of various changes. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Moving on, and now guidelines are basically something that we have covered so far, maybe most of it, but not all of it. So the point here of impartial panel of maintainers for reviews is that the whole process has to work for everybody. It should not be bogged down into interests of X partner versus Y or few partners who are very active. Looking at how Linux kernel evolved, it went down that road where some of the people who were companies who were contributing to the kernel were very active in their LTS contributions or discussions, and then the whole process got skewed, and they had to kind of scrap that. Varun, if you want to add anything there, or yeah.
That was my thought process. Just want to make this as democratic as, we don't want, just patches that are beneficial to NVIDIA going in. That's definitely not the intention. We are working as open source maintainers here and not really representing NVIDIA or Google. That's the That's the gist of the point. And so that's the maintainers should, wear that hat when they're reviewing or looking at any input that they get, any bug report that they get, and then whatever makes sense for the branch, that should go in.
Right.
And I guess that's why it's even more important at the beginning to have a very clear set of criteria for what goes in and what stays out, right? To minimize also, can I say, contentious points on the merge. Yeah. I mean, there might be the occasional fix, that one could argue, oh, it's fixing a crash. Can we have this backported? But it's not really a security feature. It's not really, it's not a feature, but it's fixing a misbehavior. How do we treat that? In that case, I would suppose that the original code maintainer would suggest, oh yes, please do port that into LTSs because this is really bad, or maybe not, right? And the problem is, and that's the kind of worms Joanna was trying not to open earlier, then, a fix like that might not work out of the box on a release that is 5 years old, right? And the kernel guys knows that very well. If you try to backport a fix, a functional fix on a 5-year-old kernel, well, good luck with that.
So we covered that a bit later in the slides as well, that question, because that is a very valid question. Very, very valid question. But yeah, to your point, that it has to be objective and well-defined criteria for the maintainership to be impartial. It also, having objective and well-defined criteria makes the whole process automate friendly. So if we can script around what patches need to be backported. Now, again, Matteo, to your point of very old LTS branches, there will be merge conflicts, and that will require human intervention. But a lot of times, the more recent LTS branches, they might even have patches applied to them automatically. A lot of stuff can be just automated. So having that well-defined criteria makes it easy for automation without requiring any extra effort, without requiring any extra discussions and human intervention. That should drive down costs, should make the whole process very smooth, and align things in a much better way. Reviewers should not focus too much on what and instead focus on how, and that is very, very critical for at least to get LTS started. Given the troubles that I've had even to get started, I think it's very, very important to actually have it running, have it doing something, even if it is not absolutely like complete thing that we wanted. But as long as it's kind of self-contained, it's doing something and it's adding value and it's there, I think that's more important. And that's why it's more important to exclude the what and focus on how the mechanism of how to do it, rather than, so sort out the what in a way that it's very objective and very clarified. And then we only work on how to do LTS rather than what LTS is. And then, as always, being an open source project, it is always open for discussions and constant improvements. So we can always discuss. And Matteo, if there are patches which are very crucial but don't fall within the criteria, then they should either be part of the criteria. So either they should be like advisory or something like that, or we should have the criteria arranged in a way that it remains impartial and it remains objective still, to include that kind of use case in future, with that kind of patch fix in future. But we do that right now, thinking about it hypothetically, it might not give us the right data point. But if we have that particular use case where, yes, there is a patch that's very, very important, everybody agrees it's needed for LTS, but it's not part of our criteria, then we have a data-driven decision. Then we can actually see what we can do with that type of patch and improve our process rather than make exceptions.
Totally agree. Thanks, Okash, for clarifying.
Sounds good. Testing criteria.
Yeah, quick comment, right, on the last slide. Yeah, I think it's very important to have that reviewer should not focus too much on what and instead focus on the how, right? Because the what should be completely discussed outside of the actual process of merging patches, right? If you're discussing the what, then I think that's an indication that the criteria is not clear in terms of what makes it. And you know, I understand the intent to make this impartial, but there is always a human element, and there's always going to be somebody that's unhappy with it. So yeah, you know, as maintainers, I don't know whether it's tf.org or who. Yeah, the maintainers should be empowered to say, okay, you know, there are 5 maintainers who have said no, so it's a no. You know, too bad, right? If you're not there, I think the effort and burden to do this will be, or the cost to do this will be significant.
I totally agree. I think I couldn't have put it better than that. The what discussion should be outside of the LTS thing itself. Testing criteria. So we would have, you know, like I mentioned before, TFTF tests will not, the head of TFTF tests would not apply to an earlier LTS branch, or may not apply to an earlier LTS branch. So we have to branch TFTF and version it in sync with LTS, so that we can actually regression test that particular LTS correctly. CI/CD static analysis scans, these, I think that, and covariety scans, things that we already apply should be carried forward to LTS as well. Things that apply to an LTS, like covariety scans and CI/CD static analysis scans that apply to particular LTS, should be carried for that LTS forward as well, as we apply, you know, patch fixes to that LTS. And then there will be platform tests, which can be handled in upstream if you're one of the paid members, or downstream as well, if you know, if you want to do it downstream.
The last thing is, oh sorry, the last thing, platform test downstream and upstream, is a little concerning, right? At least at first glance, because let's say you put in a patch, it works on 8 platforms, but 2 platforms it does not work, and you don't know until much later, right? How do you ensure that, you know, downstream tests pass? You know, upstream tests, yes, I think you can potentially guarantee, and assuming you've got you know, boards and hardware for it.
Yeah, so downstream, the onus is on the partners themselves, and if they don't flag it on time, then it's too bad, right? They missed it. They have to. I mean, people who are interested in this are running production devices. The expectation is that they pay attention to these things.
So patches in the upstream, you know, people, you know, partners who've got boards in the CI farm, the OpenCI farm, of course, will see the patches tested automatically as part of the CI system. I guess it's up to our other partners, if they're downstream, they're going to have to say, oh, there's a patch there, and then apply it themselves, and, you know, more manually check and do it, do that testing before the patch gets merged if there's a breakage downstream. Otherwise, you're going to be chasing it, aren't you? If you wait for it to get in the tree, then it's too late then for the downstream platforms if they haven't tested the platform while it's under review.
Right. Then we need to have a window of time where, you know, we notify the upstream platforms saying that, hey, here's a patch that's going in, flag within this 2-week window. Otherwise, it's going in, right? Once maintainers say yes, this meets the criteria, and all the other tests have passed.
Yeah, I've taken note of this. I think you raised this point earlier as well in a different format, but I got your point, because partner, you know, what do we do with the patch fixes? Like, we have a criteria for the initial 0.0 LTS, but then for patch fixes we need some time for it to be tested and also tested by downstream. But I think you make a good point. The partners have to say, yes, this is okay, or we give a deadline, or both, right? So if we have a deadline of 2 weeks, let's say, and the partners, they flag it within those 2 weeks. Okay, we've got an issue. This patch doesn't work for us. Then we stop it and then fix for the partner and then go forward that way. Or partner
right, and yet again, I mean, not to drill down into too many details, right? And yeah, if it's a security fix that needs to go out quickly, then again we'll have a trade-off of pushing it out for yet another n weeks, right, and delay everybody else's security fix, right? So
yeah,
for this to be successful, some of those arbitration rules need to be
correct,
clear, if not immediately, pretty quickly.
Correct. And I think, again, this is one of those things where let's assume that none of this happens. Everybody's on the same page. No partner, delays critical security bugs. When that does happen, then we have a data point, and then we can think about these things in a much more clear way. Right. So open questions. Does anybody have a problem if we pick a November release for LTS release? The reason I say we want November is because it aligns with Linux LTS release, which is at the end of the year. And if TFA is running with Android, then Android comes out in September. Every new Android, like September, October, like fall, during fall it comes out. So if a device is under development, you want to give give the LTS enough time to run on the device and test and develop until you release it with new Android, and hence it aligns with that. So if we pick November LTS, and then there's about 10 months of development time where it can be hardened, etc. Instead, if we pick the May release, then we have some soak time, maybe June, July, or August, and then next in September, Android comes out, and that would be too quick between LTS and the product release itself.
I'm not sure the question is the right one we should be asking, right? Is it convenient for all partners? I think depending on who, you'll have different opinions. It's really whether it's convenient for the community, right? What is the most convenient time for the community as opposed to partners?
The reason, that's a good point though. The reason I mentioned partners here is because this is a commercially driven thing. A whole LTS thing is for products, and hence partners. But yeah, we can say community as well. But the general question is is everybody happy with November, or is there a particular reason why it should not be November?
So the TFA releases are generally 6 months apart. They actually used to be April and October, but they've drifted a little bit over time into sort of May and November now. I guess the intent, I think, always was to have a stable mainline release that had a tag on every 6 months so partners could pick that up. I guess this model is changing that a little bit, because I guess the expectation is partners would want the LTS releases. I suppose there's nothing to stop partners still basing their products off of mainline if they want to, like they do today, I guess.
Well, quick question, right? When we say partners, who do we mean? Are we talking about the tf.org members or just the upstream platforms? One example that comes to mind is, say, Ampere. I don't see an upstream port for it, right? But yeah, they're in and out every now and again. Are they considered partners in this discussion?
Well, I suppose so. I suppose the answer is yes. So it's the point you were making, Raghu. Probably we should say for the community, even though it's kind of a fake secret, right? So the concept of LTSs will be useful for downstream products, right? For downstream partners, which makes products out of TFA. So it's not just for the sake of the communities. We don't do LTSs just because of the casual developers, right? So there is a commercial aspect. Okash is totally right. But the idea, people correct me if I'm wrong, is that the LTSs will be available to everyone, right? There will be an open concept. Now we can discuss about testing and boards. That's another story. But the LTS branches themselves will be very much Linux kernel LTSs available to everyone. So members or non-members, you can go pick up your LTS release, port it downstream on your platform, and you are guaranteed to stay on a release which is supported for 5 years. So back to your question, yes, Ampere will benefit of that. You know, all the other cloud vendors that are known to use ARM will benefit from that. Everyone in the ARM ecosystem.
I do have a hard stop right now. I'll try to continue because this meeting I'm booking. I'll try to continue and finish off the slides, but I might need a little bit of gap, every couple of minutes, just to relocate. That's okay.
Yes, I don't think we finished today, have we? So there'll be more discussions.
Yeah.
Finish the slides, and I've got some ideas of where we go next.
Cool. So the other question is how we handle LTS only bug fixes, and that's the situation that Matteo was referring to. So if, let's say, an example of this will be an LTS branch that becomes very old, and we want to push a change to the it becomes very old, and then we find there's a problem in that particular branch. It's so old that the problem only exists in that branch, but doesn't exist in the main branch. Example of that will be, let's say, if xlet v2 is there in the main branch, and xlet v1 translation tables library for v1 has been deprecated completely, right, in the main branch, so it's kind of removed even. And then we find that translation table library in v1, which is in one of the older LTSs, has a bug. What do we do in that case, right? Again, firstly, if it is not part of the advisories and it's not there, it's not for LTS. But then the question is that I think I don't have exact answer for this, but again, I would say when we hit that criteria, we have an actual data point, and we rethink about the process at that point, rather than future-proofing it upfront.
I agree, and I think whoever the maintainers are, a lot of it sits in their lap of how to address such a thing, and what type of changes and where they're coming from.
Absolutely. Okay. I think that makes sense. And then, yeah, we can always discuss these types of changes as well. But rather than making exceptions, we adapt the process to fit. So the process evolves, the criteria kind of evolves. The next thing is mentorship model. Again, this is a long discussion. I don't think we'll be at all be able to cover this today. But the question is whether it should be tf.org, or there should be a panel of maintainers from the community, or made from the partners. Pros and cons of both of them. Since I have the advantage of speaking here, I push for like tf.org to maintain this for everybody. But then that raises questions of funding and etc. And maybe that's something that we can cover in different discussion forums as well. With panel partners, but then why? Then the question of how do we ensure that there's no structural way of ensuring their partners are unbiased, because naturally they will be biased towards their own products, and they would be not willing to work on things that don't directly affect their products. The other question with partners, panel maintainers, is that when maintainers when the employee moves on to a different company, then again, there's a situation whether they would continue to be maintainer or not, right? Whereas if it is handled by tf.org, then that sort of problem wouldn't happen. And also we kind of ensure that impartiality as well, that we are holding so close to our hearts.
I'm not sure I buy
your arguments, Okash. Sorry about that.
Mhm.
I appreciate we are already 5 minutes over, so I don't want to open a can of worms of conversation. I think we will have to really discuss these points. I also appreciate there aren't so many partners dialed in today, so we might give people some time to review the recording and then maybe do another session. I do believe that all the arguments you make for the panel of external people can be also applied to partners that are members of TF.org, right? At the end of the day, it's all about trusting whoever you appoint as LTS maintainer or guardian. If there is trust that this person is behaving in the benefit of the community itself rather than its originating company, then everything is sorted. And that's very much what the kernel does, and what also our maintainers do in the community, not just our people, right? Varun is a maintainer, and I totally trust him to make the right decisions, not representing NVIDIA in that context, but a TF.org maintainer. Anyway, it's a long conversation that we can have in various different tables, so let's not get too bogged down now.
Sure. Moving on, the next thing is the intention of increasing the LTS branch support to 7 years, and the couple of reasons. Sorry, I have to move out. Let me come back in a bit.
I can continue, Okash, if you want.
Yeah, sure, please.
Right. So I think for the last 2 points, there was a discussion of increasing the branch support for 7 years down the line. So initially we are thinking only 5 years to start with, but if we have to increase it for 7 years, then just wanted to gauge the interest in that area. I understand there's again funding and maintainership and all of those questions come into picture. And I think this question was driven from the product part, mostly from the Android side of things, where if we want to support those devices for more than 5, let's say 7 years, then is it possible, or do we have interest in that area?
Personally, I'm almost inclined to say we should start with 2 or 3 years, and then move it to 5 or 7. But yeah, I see the 5 and 7 year number definitely.
Right. So just to clarify, the reason behind this is that we already lose 1 year, right? So LTS comes out, and we are going to, like, the likely process is that we work on an LTS and then we release a product. So we already kind of lose about roughly 1 year by the time the product is out. Now, if you want to say the product has support for 4 years, then you're okay with 5 years support. But usually you want to have longer support, and that's why 5 years comes in. Again, if you look at Linux has more churn. It gets more updates, that kind of stuff. It still has 5 years of LTS support. Firmware tends to have a longer life cycle than HLOS. So that too can kind of make sense for it from that point of view, for it to be longer, right? The reason to push it for 7 years is that then we are in a situation where we can we can release a product with an older LTS that somebody has worked on for long enough, maybe year and a half, and still be comfortable with it. You still get 5 years of in-field support.
So one comment I've got, I've been assuming here, and please tell me if I've assumed wrong, that we'll start with this November. So there'll be that'll be the first year. So we won't have 7 years straight away. You're not planning the last 7 years of November/October releases that we create LTS branches for. We're going to do this incrementally going forward, aren't we? Is that the plan?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We
Yeah,
want to
start
start.
5 years.
Yeah.
So you won't have 7 branches having to maintain for 7 years. And I guess the thought process behind this may I guess at the point we're saying now is we're not ruling this out, but we you know, it's a decision the group that maintains all these branches can decide as we go forward. You know, if you feel it doesn't make sense after 5 years that release nobody's using now, you know, you could make that decision perhaps.
Yeah.
Totally. I think, again, this goes back to like process evolving as we go forward. So if we have these discussions and we decide that, yes, it's okay to extend it to 7 years, we go for 7 years. We start out with 5 years for sure, but, you know, we should leave room open for discussions on that as well, is what the slide's trying to say here.
Sure.
Varun, do you want to continue this?
Yeah, I think the last one, we did not hear any concerns when we said that we will include bug fixes for external components. So I'm assuming that it's okay to include bug fixes advisories for these external components because we deliver the firmware as a whole. So maybe we can skip this question and move on to the next slide.
Well, yeah. So, sorry, go ahead, Jana.
I was going to say there's two types. I guess there's those external components we include in the TFA tree, and then there's those that we advise you link against this version that you know that you take the TFA tree and then you take this version of some external component. I guess there's those two things to be considered.
Yeah, and when we say bug fixes here, did we mean security bug fixes or just any bug fix? Right, at least slide 2 or slide 3, if I remember right, didn't, or did we say bug fixes?
We said
security advisory.
So anything that makes it into security advisory, if it is part of external components, we include that into the backboard.
Yeah, so bug fixes can be of two types, right? Security advisory driven bug fix or just a random bug fix, right? A functional or let's improve code bug fix. So yeah, maybe we need to be very clear that we're talking only about that.
Correct. So I think that's the idea is when we agreed here, it was because the criteria was clear.
Sure.
Here, it's kind of opening up. So maybe this is a discussion that we again want to have going down and then update the criteria as we go.
And to be fair, I believe these criteria are a very good starting point, much clearer probably than what the kernel has. You know that in the kernel, everything is considered a bug, and the kernel is much more reluctant in providing security advisories or CVEs. In that sense, the TF.org community is much more active and prompt, you know, in issuing advisories or CVEs when that is the case. So you have a very distinct demarcation between what's a security fix and what is not. Whereas in the kernel is a bit more vague. Yeah, well, it's not that it's vague. I guess in the kernel it's down to the threat model, right? What you're trying to protect, privilege escalation or memory corruption or what.
Well, that makes it more subjective, the discussions, you know. So I think we are fortunate to have the sort of setup that we have in TFA, which we can now leverage for something like LTS.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, call to action. So yeah, basically the ask here is for the community to review the proposal and see what we can do, like basically get LTS in place.
So what I suggest that you might want to do is make sure that this recording and the slides are available on the mailing list, and sort of promote it there, you know, for people to look at, and then perhaps come back in September and have another session to, you know, hey guys, hopefully, you know, join this session, you know, please review what we discussed before the summer breaks and see if we can move this on. because I think there's going to be various folks in and out, and already some of our French colleagues, I think some of the partners out there are probably celebrating Bastille Day, and so they're not on the call and things like that. But there's nothing to stop us trying to promote it over the summer in the mailing list and see if there's any further discussions people want to have there, but then perhaps have another live tech forum in sometime in September. Hopefully when a lot of the vacations are over.
Yeah, if you want to start doing if you want to start having LTS branches this November, then yeah, we need to start setting windows where we can start taking feedback, and if we really want to execute on it this year, right?
Yeah, I was thinking that maybe we want to like get back sooner than September. Otherwise, we have to wait one whole year for November of next year.
So I agree with Joanna that the first step would be, I guess, publishing a note on the mailing list with a link to the recording and with the slides. I'll let you dictate the progression from then onwards. I can see that if you want to start declaring an LTS this November, things have to move very quickly. It's also true that if you start with one in November, you have to have some minimal infrastructure and agreement on the funding in place, which you might want to be future-proof. But it's also true that at the beginning, you only have one branch with likely a small number of things to be backported. I think the next steps would be drilling down a bit more the funding conversation and the who does what conversation. There is a TSC meeting for the TF.org community next week. I'm not sure if some of you would like to participate. I guess TSC is usually reserved to members, so it should be Google coming in and proposing a talk to the rest of the TF.org steering committee. That's next Thursday. So that's another opportunity, maybe even to discuss the how do we do that topic.
Yeah, I don't mind.
Yeah, then the board, the TF.org board, just to give you a sense, is not going to meet until beginning of September. So if there is any decision on funding or things like that, it's going to slip till September. That's from a board point of view. But the TSC is meeting next week, so that's an opportunity probably not to be missed.
For sure. And then we can have things ready, like at least the designs and stuff like that, so that when we have the September board meeting, then we can, move towards a decision and execution phase to line up for the end of November release. So LTS still is going to be a few months after the November release, but yeah, that should buy us some time as well.
I was about to say, the November release will come out, and then it's February, wasn't it? Time frame that you want this firmed up, and it might be the first one that we have. Initially, it might be more manual running of tests and things than all the automation in place, because I can't imagine. Well, it depends how the funding goes, I guess, really.
Yeah.
This is the difficulty. I know we've tried to concentrate on the technical aspects of what's the best type of LTS, what do we need. Now comes probably the harder thing to solve, and how is this organized and paid for?
Ideally, we'll have all the tests automated for LTS. However, even if you don't, when we do some tests manually and then there's not complete testing, as long as the partners do their own testing, that LTS is still better than 2.8, right?
Yeah.
The other side of this story would be we put this effort, we get the branch going, and then eventually there is no funding to it. So then what do we do? I mean, we also need to think about that side of the coin.
I mean, I guess the idea is that we plan out things, but we don't execute until we have the board meeting, and the final decision.
Okay. I mean, I'm not on the board, so I can only do so much. But no, and the only thing that I can do is speculate. Now it's all up to the board and that you have to talk to make this happen.
I think.
Sorry, go on, John.
I'll say you got to be. It's not just TIFF.org and the board. It is the people. You know, it's the community. If the community doesn't support this effort, then it's going to struggle to be a success, regardless of what budget that TIFF.org may or may not be able to find. That's my thoughts anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's why I would suggest again. Present in front of the technical steering committee next week. You might get some useful inputs also on how to put this in place. Note of caution, I would be wary in just expecting, oh, fine, we can find a way to, reserve a budget from the TF.org project and problem solved, LTS will magically appear. That's not so easy, and it's not going to be that easy to go that way. So there are things that can be done funded by the project, most likely on the infrastructure, on continuous testing and things like that. But all the questions we have been discussing in the previous slides, we cannot just magically expect that there will be, a very immediate funding by the TF.org community to cover everything. But again, let's not rush too much. Like I said, suggest post everything on the list. I'll ping also all the contacts I have from other partners that might be interested and point to the open conversation. Let's discuss in the TSC next week and see how it goes.
Sounds good.
I
So
guess
are we-
that's it, I guess.
Okay. So thanks everyone. I stopped the recording.
Thanks, Vipin.
All right. Thanks all. Thanks, Varun. Thanks, Okash. This was good.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.